Victoria stood in the marble hallway outside courtroom 4B, her hands trembling as she clutched the cheap vinyl purse that held everything she owned now, a wallet with $43, her driver's license, and the keys to a 15-year-old sedan. Inside that courtroom, her entire world had just collapsed. Judge Brennan's words still echoed in her mind. Given Ms. Chambers' lack of employment history and current financial instability, this court awards primary physical custody to Mr. Chambers. The children's best interests require stability, which the petitioner cannot currently provide. Victoria was 36 years old. She had a master's degree in finance from Northwestern. And she'd just been declared unfit to raise her own children because she'd spent 12 years building someone else's empire instead of her own. Through the courtroom's glass doors, she could see Nathan loading their daughters into his Range Rover. Lily, 10 years old, pressed her palm against the window. Charlotte, 7, was crying. Nathan didn't look back as he drove away, leaving Victoria standing alone in a parking garage that smelled like exhaust and defeat. Her phone buzzed. A text from her former best friend, Adrian. Heard about the ruling. I'm sorry, but you have to understand, Nathan is part of our social circle. I can't take sides. Victoria stared at the message until the screen went dark, her own hollow reflection staring back at her. She had exactly one place to go. The cabin in the Berkshires that her grandmother had left her 4 years ago. Nathan had always refused to visit, calling it, that shack in the middle of nowhere. Now it was all she had, the one asset with her name alone on the deed. The drive took 3 hours through winding mountain roads she barely remembered from childhood summers. When she finally turned down the overgrown gravel driveway, her remaining hope crumbled further. The log cabin looked worse than she remembered. The roof sagged on one side, paint peeled from the window frames, and the front steps had rotted through in places. This was supposed to be her sanctuary, her fresh start. Victoria grabbed her single suitcase, pathetic how 12 years of marriage fit into one bag, and approached the door. The key still worked. Inside smelled of pine needles and dust, like a tomb for forgotten dreams. Her grandmother's furniture sat beneath canvas covers like ghosts. The electricity worked, barely, flickering when she flipped the switches. The pipes groaned before rusty water finally cleared. Victoria stood in what used to be Grandma Rose's kitchen and felt the full weight of her situation crash down. She was 36 years old, professionally irrelevant, financially devastated, and legally separated from her children. She had $847 in her checking account and a law degree she'd never used because Nathan had convinced her that his career in venture capital needed a full-time partner at home. "You're more valuable supporting my success," he'd said. "We don't need two incomes." What he'd really meant was that he needed someone to manage his household, entertain his investors, and raise his children while he took credit for building an empire that rested partly on her unpaid labor. That first night, Victoria wrapped herself in her grandmother's quilts and cried until her throat was raw. But when dawn broke through the dusty windows, something had shifted. She had two choices: surrender to the narrative Nathan and his lawyers had constructed, the unemployable ex-wife who contributed nothing, or prove them catastrophically wrong. Victoria chose war. She just didn't know yet that her grandmother had already armed her for battle. Victoria woke to sunlight streaming through curtains that should have been replaced a decade ago. Her back ached from the lumpy couch, but her mind was clearer than it had been in months. First priority: make this cabin livable. Second, find any source of income. Third, build a case strong enough to reclaim her children. She started with the basics. The cabin's ancient boiler coughed to life after some percussive maintenance involving a wrench and several creative curses. YouTube tutorials taught her enough about plumbing to fix the leaking bathroom sink. The local dollar store became her headquarters for cleaning supplies. 3 days into her demolition of 12 years of neglect, her neighbor appeared. Margaret Sullivan, a woman in her 70s with silver hair and sharp eyes, stood on the porch holding a casserole dish that smelled like salvation. "Thought you might be hungry," Margaret said. "Rose used to love my chicken pot pie. Figured you might too." They sat at Rose's small kitchen table while Victoria tried not to devour the entire dish in record time. "Your grandmother was proud of you," Margaret said quietly. "Always talked about your finance degree. Said you got your head for numbers from her side of the family." "I haven't used that degree in over a decade," Victoria admitted. "My ex-husband said I was more valuable at home." Margaret's expression hardened. "Rose never liked that man. Said he was the type who'd steal your sunshine and call it his." The accuracy of that statement hit Victoria like a physical blow. After Margaret left, Victoria found herself thinking about her degree. She'd graduated magna cum laude, worked briefly at a prestigious investment firm, and had genuine talent for financial analysis. Then Nathan convinced her that marriage meant choosing between career and family. She drove into town that afternoon to explore options. The results were predictably grim. Most jobs required recent experience she didn't have. The few entry-level positions paid barely enough for gas, let alone proving stability to a family court. "You might try the credit union," suggested the woman at the employment office. "They're looking for someone part-time." Berkshire Community Credit Union sat in a converted Victorian house downtown. The manager, a woman named Patricia Morrison, looked skeptical when Victoria explained her 12-year employment gap. "That's a long time away from the workforce," Patricia said, reviewing Victoria's hastily assembled resume. "And we need someone who can start immediately." "I can start tomorrow," Victoria said, probably sounding more desperate than confident. "I learn fast, and I need this job." Something in her voice must have resonated, because Patricia studied her more carefully. "Tell me about your finance background," Patricia said. "What did you focus on at Northwestern?" For the next 25 minutes, they discussed portfolio theory, risk management, and investment strategies. Victoria surprised herself by remembering more than she'd expected. Her knowledge had been dormant, not dead. "I'll give you a trial period," Patricia finally said. 3 days a week, $15 an hour, helping members with accounts and loan applications. If you work out, we'll discuss more responsibilities. $15 an hour was a universe away from Nathan's 7-figure income, but it felt like winning the lottery. Walking back to her car, Victoria called Lily's school to ask about custody arrangements. "Mr. Chambers has enrolled them at Fairmont Academy," the administrator said. Of course he had. Private school, 40 miles from her cabin, where he could control every aspect of their access to her. That evening, Victoria sat on the porch calculating her finances. Even with the credit union job, proving stability would take months. Legal fees to challenge custody would drain her tiny savings. Nathan had engineered a perfect trap. As darkness fell, Victoria noticed something odd. The porch light illuminated a section of cabin wall that looked different, newer somehow, though still weathered. She made a mental note to investigate in the morning. Instead, she focused on tomorrow. Her first day back in the professional world after 12 years. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was hers. What Victoria didn't know was that her grandmother had been planning for exactly this scenario for much longer than she'd been alive. Victoria's first day at Berkshire Community Credit Union exceeded her low expectations. Patricia stationed her at the member services desk, helping people with basic account questions and loan applications. Around noon, a young couple came in looking overwhelmed by the mortgage process. As Victoria walked them through debt-to-income ratios and interest calculations, she felt something spark inside her, the ghost of her former competence returning. "You really know this stuff," the husband said when they finished. "You made it actually make sense." The compliment meant more than he could imagine. For the first time in years, someone valued her knowledge rather than her ability to coordinate Nathan's schedule or host his investor dinners. Patricia noticed. "You're a natural," she said during Victoria's lunch break. "Have you thought about getting certified as a financial advisor? We could use someone for investment planning." The suggestion planted a seed Victoria wasn't ready to examine yet. After work, she stopped at the local grocery store. The teenager at checkout seemed unusually chatty. "You're Victoria, right? Rose's granddaughter?" When Victoria nodded, the girl smiled. "She used to come in all the time. Always bought fancy chocolate and business magazines. Said she was keeping current for when you needed her advice." The comment struck Victoria as strange. Grandma Rose had been a retired librarian, practical and quiet, more concerned with books than Bloomberg terminals. Maybe Victoria had never really known her. Driving home, she decided to investigate that odd section of wall she'd noticed. Armed with a flashlight and growing determination, she examined the area more closely. The boards were definitely newer, weathered to match but concealing something. Using a crowbar from Rose's toolshed, Victoria carefully pried them away. Behind the boards wasn't a window but a small door. Behind that was a hidden compartment built into the wall, and inside sat a fireproof safe. Victoria's hands trembled as she brought it inside under proper lighting. The safe had a 4-digit combination lock. She tried Rose's birthday. Nothing. Her own birthday. Nothing. The year Rose bought the cabin. Still nothing. Then she remembered something from childhood. Rose always said their family's lucky number was her wedding date. Everything good happened on the 17th. With shaking fingers, Victoria entered 0517, May 17th, Rose's anniversary. The safe clicked open. Inside was an envelope with Victoria's name in Rose's careful handwriting. Beneath it were documents and what looked like jewelry boxes. Victoria opened the envelope with trembling hands and unfolded several pages of Rose's familiar script. My dearest Victoria, if you're reading this, you've found your way home and discovered what I've been building for you all these years. Victoria stopped reading and looked around the quiet cabin. What had Rose been building? Victoria, you need to understand something about our family that I never told you. Your grandfather and I weren't just a librarian and a railroad worker like you believed. Before you were born, we built something together. Something I've been protecting for you your entire life. Victoria set the letter down, trying to process what Rose was telling her. Your grandfather was brilliant with investments. He started small, using his railroad pension to buy stocks everyone else overlooked. I helped him research companies, analyze their potential. We built a portfolio that grew beyond our wildest dreams. But we lived simply, deliberately. We wanted you to understand the value of education and hard work, not grow up entitled because of money you didn't earn. The letter continued for 3 pages, explaining how Rose and her grandfather had hidden their wealth, living modestly while their investments multiplied. They'd created trusts, purchased properties under different names, and carefully documented everything. We watched you fall in love with Nathan and saw how he tried to control you. Your grandfather wanted to intervene, but I convinced him to wait. I hoped you'd find your strength on your own. When you didn't, when you gave up your career to serve his ambitions, I knew we needed a different plan. If something happened to us, if you ever found yourself alone and powerless, you would need resources he couldn't touch or even know about. Rose had been playing chess while Victoria played checkers. She'd seen through Nathan's charm 20 years before Victoria did and prepared for this exact situation. Victoria looked at the documents. Stock certificates, bond records, bank account information for institutions she'd never heard of. The numbers were staggering, assets worth over $3.2 million. Beneath the financial documents were jewelry boxes containing pieces Victoria had never seen Rose wear. Diamond earrings, pearl necklaces, a watch that was unmistakably expensive. And beneath those, an insurance policy with Victoria as beneficiary. The payout amount, $4.1 million. The last item was a key attached to a business card for First Mountain Bank in Greenfield, 30 miles away. Written in Rose's handwriting, Safety Deposit Box 156. Everything else is there. Victoria spent the rest of the evening reviewing every document, trying to understand the scope of what Rose had built. It was methodical, careful, and incredibly smart, every investment documented, every transaction recorded, completely legal. Around midnight, Victoria found herself laughing through tears at the audacity of it all. While Nathan had been congratulating himself on building his venture capital empire, her supposedly simple grandmother had been quietly assembling an empire of her own. And she'd done it all to ensure Victoria would never be trapped or powerless. At the bottom of the letter, Rose had written, Victoria, your finance degree wasn't wasted. You have the knowledge to manage these assets, grow them, and build the life you deserve. You have your grandfather's mind for numbers and my patience for long-term planning. It's time to prove us right. The next morning, Victoria called Patricia to request a personal day. Then she drove to First Mountain Bank with the key and Rose's identification documents. The safety deposit box contained more surprises. Additional stock certificates, real estate deeds for properties Victoria never knew existed. Detailed instructions Rose had written for converting liquid assets into working capital. Rose owned 3 rental properties in the valley, a small commercial building downtown, and had mineral rights on over 200 acres. Sitting in the bank's private room, surrounded by evidence of Rose's secret financial genius, Victoria felt something fundamental shift inside her. The helpless woman who'd lost everything in that courtroom was gone. In her place was someone with resources, knowledge, and, for the first time in years, real power. Nathan had no idea what was coming. And Victoria was going to enjoy every minute of showing him exactly who she really was. Victoria spent 3 days reviewing every document, every investment, every piece of the financial puzzle Rose had left her. This wasn't just savings, it was a sophisticated portfolio that any professional would respect. Her first move was liquidating enough assets to establish immediate stability. She contacted the investment firm managing Rose's accounts and scheduled a meeting. The advisor, Thomas Greenfield, treated her with the respect that comes with having a substantial portfolio rather than the condescension she'd grown accustomed to as Nathan's discarded ex-wife. Your grandmother was remarkable, Thomas said, reviewing Rose's investment history. She had an intuitive understanding of market patterns that most professionals lack. These positions she selected 20 years ago are still outperforming benchmarks. Within a week, Victoria had access to liquid funds that solved every immediate problem. She paid off the cabin's tiny remaining mortgage, upgraded the electrical and plumbing systems, and hired contractors to make it truly livable. More importantly, she established new accounts Nathan's lawyers could never access or discover. But money was only part of the equation. She needed to rebuild her professional credentials in ways that would impress a family court judge. Victoria called her former supervisor from the investment firm where she'd worked before marriage. "Victoria Chambers," he said, sounding surprised. "I heard you got married and moved to Connecticut. How've you been?" When she explained her situation, carefully omitting details about her newfound wealth, he was sympathetic and practical. "The industry's changed a lot in 12 years, he admitted. "But your foundation is solid. Have you considered getting certified as a wealth manager? There's good demand for independent advisors, especially in underserved areas." He connected her with a certification program she could complete online in 8 months. With her finance background and Rose's detailed records to study, Victoria felt confident about the coursework. The children remained her biggest challenge. Nathan allowed supervised visits once weekly, monitored by a court-appointed observer who documented every interaction. Lily seemed confused and angry, struggling to understand why Mom couldn't come home. Charlotte was quieter, more withdrawn, but still climbed into Victoria's lap the moment she saw her. "Daddy says you can't take care of us anymore," Lily said during their third visit. "He says you don't have a job or a real house." Victoria chose her words carefully, aware everything would be reported to Nathan's lawyers. "I have a house now, sweetheart. Where great-grandma Rose used to live. And I'm starting a new career helping people with their money. It's what I studied in college before you were born. Can we see your house?" Charlotte asked hopefully, but the court order specified visits could only happen in neutral locations under supervision. Nathan's strategy was working perfectly, keeping Victoria isolated from her children while building his case that she was unfit. That evening, Victoria called her college roommate Sarah, now a successful family law attorney in Boston. "Victoria," Sarah exclaimed, "I've been wondering what happened to you. You just disappeared after graduation." Victoria explained everything: the divorce, the custody battle, her need for legal guidance. Sarah listened without judgment, then asked pointed questions about Victoria's financial situation and timeline. "You need to be strategic," Sarah said finally. "Courts are reluctant to change custody quickly, but they will reconsider if you demonstrate significant improvement. Document everything: your income, housing, career development. And whatever you do, don't let his lawyers know about any assets until you're ready to reveal them." Sarah's advice aligned with what Victoria had already begun planning. She would rebuild her professional reputation, establish herself as a capable parent, and only then reveal the full extent of her resources. Let Nathan think he'd left her powerless while she quietly assembled everything needed to take him down. 3 months into her new life, Patricia called Victoria into her office. "You've impressed several of our larger members," Patricia explained. "They're asking specifically for you when they need investment advice. Would you be interested in taking on more responsibility?" The promotion came with a substantial salary increase and flexible scheduling that would accommodate her certification studies. More importantly, it provided exactly the kind of professional progress that would strengthen her custody case. But the real surprise came when Victoria reviewed her first quarter investment returns. Following Rose's strategies and applying her own analysis, she'd grown her portfolio by 14% in just 3 months. She wasn't just managing inherited wealth. She was actively building it. Nathan had always told her she didn't understand business, that she was too emotional for financial decisions. As Victoria reviewed the numbers proving him catastrophically wrong, she realized something profound. She wasn't just getting her life back. She was discovering who she'd always been capable of becoming. And she was just getting started. 6 months after finding Rose's letter, Victoria was unrecognizable from the woman who'd fled Nathan's courtroom victory. Her certification program was nearly complete. She'd begun taking independent wealth management clients through the credit union. Word spread quickly in their small community about the new advisor who actually listened and explained complex concepts clearly. But the real victory came when Victoria purchased the commercial building downtown that Rose had secretly owned. Instead of renting it out, she renovated the ground floor into her own wealth management practice. The space had been a defunct insurance office, but Victoria could envision exactly what it would become: professional, welcoming, completely hers. The renovation project connected her with local contractors, business owners, and community leaders who saw her as an emerging professional rather than Nathan Chambers' discarded ex-wife. You're really doing it, Margaret said, watching the construction crew install new windows. Rose would be so proud. Victoria's supervised visits with the children had evolved into longer, less formal meetings. The court observer, a kind woman named Ruth, noted in her reports that both children seemed happy and secure with their mother. Lily had begun asking questions about Victoria's new house and career. Charlotte had started making plans for when Mommy has her own home again. Nathan seemed increasingly frustrated by Victoria's transformation. Their brief interactions during custody exchanges revealed a man who'd expected her to crumble and instead found someone thriving. I don't know what game you're playing, Victoria, he said after one particularly unsuccessful attempt to provoke her. But this independent woman act won't impress anyone where it matters. His comment revealed more about his insecurity than Victoria's situation. He'd built his identity around being her provider. Without a helpless ex-wife to rescue or control, he seemed genuinely confused. The most satisfying moment came at Lily's parent-teacher conference. Her teacher, Mrs. Reynolds, commented on the improvement in Lily's mood and academic performance. She talks about you constantly, Mrs. Reynolds shared. Your new career, your house, how proud she is. Whatever you're doing, it's having a positive impact on her emotional well-being. That evening, Victoria stood in her renovated kitchen, reviewing financial statements and planning strategies for her growing practice. The cabin that had once seemed like a symbol of failure now felt like home. She opened Rose's letter again, reading the final paragraph she'd memorized but still found meaningful. Victoria, you have everything you need to build the life you deserve. The money is just a tool. Your real power comes from understanding your own worth and refusing to let anyone diminish it. Trust yourself, trust your education, and trust that I knew exactly what I was doing when I prepared all of this for you. Looking around at everything she'd accomplished in 6 months, Victoria finally understood. The inheritance had given her opportunities, but the transformation came from rediscovering capabilities she'd abandoned to please Nathan. She wasn't just financially independent. She was intellectually, emotionally, and professionally independent in ways she'd never experienced. Victoria's phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Ready to file the custody modification petition? Your documentation looks impressive, Victoria typed back. Yes. It's time. The legal battle ahead would be challenging, but she was no longer the powerless woman who'd lost everything in that first courtroom. Nathan had made a crucial error when he dismissed her as unemployable and incompetent. He'd underestimated not just her determination, but her actual abilities. Soon he would discover that the woman he'd been dismissing had become something far more formidable. As Victoria prepared for bed in the house that was truly hers, surrounded by evidence of the life she'd built from nothing, she felt a deep satisfaction that had everything to do with justice and nothing to do with revenge. Her children deserved a mother who knew her own worth. And finally, they were going to get one. The custody modification hearing was scheduled for a Wednesday morning in November, exactly 1 year after Nathan had destroyed her life in the same courthouse. This time, Victoria walked through those doors wearing a tailored charcoal suit she'd purchased with her own money, carrying a briefcase full of documentation that told a very different story than Nathan expected. Sarah met her in the hallway, looking confident and sharp. Remember, Sarah said, stay calm no matter what his lawyers try. Your transformation speaks for itself, but your composure will seal the deal. Nathan sat across the courtroom with his high-priced legal team, looking every bit the successful venture capitalist. But something was different about his demeanor, a tension Victoria had never seen before, like a man who suspected the game had changed but didn't understand the new rules. Judge Brennan, the same judge who'd awarded Nathan custody a year ago, reviewed their case files carefully. Ms. Chambers, you've requested modification based on substantial changes in circumstances. Please present your evidence. Sarah stood and began methodically presenting Victoria's case. Employment history showing consistent advancement. Client testimonials. Documentation of her completed certification. Bank statements proving stable, substantial income. Photos and inspection reports of her renovated home. But the real bombshell came when Sarah presented Victoria's investment portfolio statements. Your Honor, Ms. Chambers has not only achieved financial stability, she's demonstrated exceptional financial acumen. Her investment returns over the past year place her in the top 5% of professional money managers. Victoria watched Nathan's face as the numbers were read aloud. His expression shifted from confusion to shock to something approaching panic. He'd spent a year believing she was struggling to survive on her credit union salary. The reality of her financial position was clearly devastating to his narrative. His lead attorney, Marcus Webb, requested a brief recess. Through the conference room's glass door, Victoria could see Nathan gesticulating frantically while his lawyers tried to calm him down. When they returned, Webb's strategy was predictably desperate. "Your Honor, we question the source of these alleged assets. Ms. Chambers had no financial resources at the time of divorce. Where did this money come from?" Sarah was ready. She presented Rose's death certificate, inheritance documentation, and proof that every asset had been legally transferred and properly reported. "Ms. Chambers inherited these assets from her late grandmother," Sarah explained calmly. "Every transaction has been documented and verified by certified accountants. There is nothing suspicious about these funds." Webb tried a different angle. Even if legitimate, sudden wealth doesn't qualify someone to be a primary parent. Mr. Chambers has provided stable, consistent care for over a year. That's when Victoria asked permission to address the court directly. Judge Brennan nodded, and Victoria stood, feeling calmer than she had any right to feel. "Your Honor, a year ago I was a different person. I had allowed my marriage to define me so completely that I lost sight of my own capabilities. The divorce, as painful as it was, forced me to rediscover who I am." Victoria looked directly at Nathan. "I'm not asking for custody because I inherited money. I'm asking because I've proven I can build a stable, independent life that serves my children's best interests. I've rebuilt my career, established financial security, and created a home where Lily and Charlotte can thrive." Judge Brennan asked pointed questions about her work schedule, childcare arrangements, and long-term planning. Victoria answered each confidently, drawing on months of preparation and genuine expertise. The most powerful testimony came from Ruth, the court-appointed supervisor. "Over the past year, I've observed significant positive changes in both children during their time with their mother," Ruth testified. "Ms. Chambers has demonstrated patience, emotional stability, and genuine engagement with Lily and Charlotte's needs. The children consistently express happiness about their visits." Nathan's team tried to discredit Ruth's observations, but her professional credentials and detailed documentation made their attacks ineffective. Judge Brennan cut Webb off mid-argument. "Counselor, Ms. Chambers has presented comprehensive evidence of career advancement, professional certification, stable housing, and substantial financial resources. Unless you have specific evidence of wrongdoing, your client's custody arrangement is not permanent simply because it was the original decision." The hearing concluded with final arguments. Webb painted Victoria as an opportunist who'd suddenly discovered motherhood. Sarah presented her as a woman who'd overcome adversity to build exactly the environment children need. Judge Brennan announced he would render his decision within 2 weeks. As they left the courthouse, Nathan cornered Victoria in the parking lot, his composure finally cracking. "I don't know how you pulled this off, Victoria," he said, voice tight with anger. "But money doesn't make you a better mother." Victoria looked at the man who'd once controlled every aspect of her existence and felt only pity. "Nathan, they're my children too. And unlike you, I'm not trying to keep them from their other parent. I'm trying to give them a mother who knows her own worth." 2 weeks felt like 2 years, but Judge Brennan's call finally came on a Friday afternoon. "Ms. Chambers, I've reached my decision regarding your custody modification request. Could you be in my chambers Monday morning at 9? That weekend was the longest of Victoria's life. Monday morning arrived with the first snow of winter, covering the mountain roads in white that felt like a fresh start. Judge Brennan's chambers were less formal than the courtroom. "I've reviewed all the evidence," Judge Brennan began, "and I'm prepared to modify the custody arrangement. Ms. Chambers, you've demonstrated remarkable personal and professional growth. Your financial stability, career development, and housing situation clearly meet the court's standards for primary custody." The words hit Victoria like pure relief. She'd won. However, Judge Brennan continued, "I'm implementing a gradual transition schedule. For the next month, the children will spend weekends with you. After that, assuming the transition goes smoothly, they'll live with you during the week and spend alternate weekends with their father." Nathan's attorney objected, but Judge Brennan's mind was made up. "Mr. Webb, your client argued that Ms. Chambers was financially incapable of providing for the children. She has not only overcome that challenge but exceeded expectations. The children deserve a meaningful relationship with both parents." The first weekend went better than Victoria dared hope. Lily spent Saturday organizing her new bedroom, chattering excitedly about which friends she wanted to invite for sleepovers. Charlotte was quieter but seemed genuinely happy. "Mommy, are we going to live here forever now?" Lily asked as Victoria tucked her in Saturday night. "We're going to live here as long as you want to, sweetheart," Victoria promised. "This is our home now." The next week, Patricia called Victoria into her office. "Victoria, we need to discuss something sensitive," Patricia said, looking uncomfortable. I received a call from someone claiming to investigate your financial background. They were asking about your salary, your client relationships, whether the credit union was aware of significant unreported income. The harassment had begun. Nathan couldn't challenge the custody decision directly, so he was trying to undermine her professional reputation. What did you tell them? Victoria asked. Nothing. I told them all employee information is confidential. But Victoria, they also contacted several of your clients with similar questions. Victoria called Sarah immediately. This is actually good news, Sarah said. If we can prove Nathan is behind this, we can file for sanctions and possibly have his visitation restricted. But proving Nathan's involvement would be challenging. He was too smart to conduct the harassment himself. Victoria needed a different strategy. That evening, she sat in her office reviewing options. She'd worked too hard rebuilding her life to let Nathan destroy it through whisper campaigns. Then she remembered something Rose had written about building alliances and protecting yourself through community connections. The next morning, Victoria called a meeting with Patricia, her accountant, and 2 other local business owners she'd developed relationships with. She explained the situation honestly. This kind of behavior is unacceptable, said Janet, who owned the town's largest real estate agency. We've all seen how hard you've worked. Anyone trying to undermine that is attacking our entire business community. What emerged was an informal network of mutual protection. Business leaders who knew Victoria's character would refer suspicious inquiries to Patricia, who would document them and report them to Sarah. You're not alone in this, Patricia assured her. We're not going to let someone tear down what you've built through lies. For the first time since discovering Nathan's harassment campaign, Victoria felt confident about weathering the storm. But she also began planning something Nathan wouldn't expect. If he wanted to play games with her reputation, she would remind him exactly who he was dealing with. The scared woman he'd divorced was gone forever. Nathan's harassment campaign intensified over the next month, but it was having the opposite effect he'd intended. Instead of destroying Victoria's reputation, his transparent attempts at sabotage were generating sympathy and support. The breaking point came when one of Victoria's elderly clients, Mrs. Patterson, called in tears. Victoria, dear, someone came to my house claiming to be from the tax department. They said you were under investigation and that I needed to provide documentation of all services you've performed. The impersonation of a government official crossed a legal line even Nathan's lawyers couldn't protect. Victoria immediately contacted Sarah, who filed complaints with both local police and the state attorney general's office. He's gotten sloppy, Sarah said with satisfaction. Desperation makes people stupid. But while they pursued legal remedies, Victoria decided to implement a more direct solution. She'd learned enough about Nathan's business over their 12 years of marriage to know where his vulnerabilities lay. His venture capital firm had grown successful partly through connections with local government officials and strategic relationships. What most people didn't know was that several of these relationships involved arrangements that skated close to ethical violations. Victoria called her accountant, David, and scheduled a private meeting. I need you to help me understand something, she said, pulling out financial records from her marriage. Look at these charitable donations Nathan made. Do any seem unusual? David reviewed the documents thoroughly. These donations to the Metro Development Fund are interesting. That's not a registered charity, it's a political action committee with very limited reporting requirements. Further investigation revealed that Nathan's charitable giving had primarily benefited a PAC that funded campaigns for local officials who subsequently awarded his firm lucrative municipal contracts. While not technically illegal, the arrangement would be embarrassing if exposed, potentially damaging to both Nathan and the officials involved. Victoria made copies of all relevant documents and scheduled a meeting with Nathan at a neutral location, the coffee shop where she'd once felt so vulnerable. This time, she was the one controlling the agenda. Nathan arrived looking confident, probably expecting another opportunity to intimidate her. Victoria, I'm glad you called, he began. I think we need to discuss this custody situation rationally. Victoria smiled and opened her briefcase, removing a folder of documents. Nathan, I want to discuss something else entirely. I've been reviewing our old tax returns, and I found some interesting patterns in your charitable giving. His expression shifted from confidence to confusion as she laid out photocopies of donation records, PAC reports, and contract awards. Victoria watched understanding dawn on his face as he realized what she'd discovered and how damaging it could be if made public. These donations aren't illegal, he said carefully. But I imagine the voters who elected your friends on the city council might find them interesting. Especially if the information appeared in the newspaper along with a timeline of subsequent contracts awarded to your firm. Nathan's face paled as he understood the implications. His business reputation, political connections, and financial success all depended on maintaining relationships that couldn't survive public scrutiny. "What do you want?" he asked, voice tight with anger. "I want you to stop harassing my clients and employees. I want you to cease all attempts to investigate or undermine my business. And I want you to accept that our custody arrangement is final." Victoria leaned forward, maintaining steady eye contact. "In return, these documents remain private, and your political friends never learn that their relationship with you has been documented." The silence stretched between them. Nathan was realizing that the powerless ex-wife he'd dismissed had become someone capable of destroying everything he'd built. "You've changed, Victoria," he said finally, his voice carrying grudging respect. "Yes, I have," Victoria agreed. "I've learned to value myself and protect what matters to me." After he left, Victoria sat in the coffee shop for another hour, processing what had just happened. She'd successfully neutralized Nathan's harassment campaign and established clear boundaries he wouldn't dare cross. But more importantly, she'd proven to herself that she could stand up to the man who'd once controlled every aspect of her life. The scared woman who'd lost everything in divorce court was truly gone forever. In her place stood someone who understood that real power came not from controlling others, but from knowing your own worth and refusing to accept less than you deserved. The children's transition to living with Victoria full-time went more smoothly than she'd dared hope. Lily threw herself into decorating her room and making new friends in the neighborhood. Charlotte gradually came out of her shell, talking about school and friends with enthusiasm Victoria hadn't seen in over a year. But the real test came 6 weeks into their new arrangement when Charlotte had a nightmare and called for Victoria instead of asking for her father. Victoria found her sitting up in bed, tears streaming down her face. "I dreamed that Daddy took us away again and we couldn't find you," Charlotte whispered as Victoria held her close. "That's not going to happen, sweetheart," Victoria promised. "This is our home, and nobody can take you away from me anymore." As she sat with Charlotte until she fell back asleep, Victoria realized that winning custody had been just the beginning. The real victory was creating an environment where her children felt safe, valued, and free to be themselves. Victoria's business continued flourishing beyond anything she'd imagined possible. Word of mouth brought new clients weekly, and she'd hired 2 part-time assistants to help manage the growing workload. The building Rose had left her now housed not just Victoria's wealth management practice, but also a small accounting firm and a legal aid clinic serving their rural community. But success brought new challenges. Several larger financial firms had approached her about acquisition offers. The attention was flattering but overwhelming. "You've created something special here," said a representative from Regional Wealth Partners who'd driven up to meet with her. "Your client retention and satisfaction scores are exceptional. We'd love to discuss bringing your operation under our umbrella." The offer was substantial, enough to provide security for herself and her children for life. But something about the conversation felt wrong, like surrendering control just when she'd finally learned to use it. That evening, Victoria called Thomas Greenfield to discuss the situation. "Acquisition offers are compliments, but they're also tests," he said thoughtfully. "The question isn't whether you can make money by selling. The question is whether selling serves your long-term goals." Victoria spent the weekend considering what she really wanted. Financial security was important, but she already had that. Professional recognition was gratifying, but she'd proven her competence. What she valued most was independence, the ability to make decisions based on what was right for her clients, her children, and herself, rather than corporate expectations. Monday morning, Victoria called Regional Wealth Partners and politely declined. "I appreciate the opportunity, but I've built something here that serves my community in ways that might not survive corporate restructuring. I'm not ready to give up that control." The most satisfying recognition came from Lily's teacher, Mrs. Reynolds. "Lily has shown remarkable improvement in confidence and academic performance," she said during a conference. "But more importantly, she talks about you with such pride. She tells everyone her mom helps people with their money and owns her own business." Hearing that her professional success was contributing to her daughter's self-esteem rather than detracting from their relationship felt like the ultimate validation. That evening, as Victoria helped Charlotte with homework while Lily practiced piano, she felt a deep contentment that had nothing to do with financial success or professional recognition. She'd built a life that honored all aspects of who she was: mother, businesswoman, granddaughter, and community member. The most profound realization came when Lily asked about college planning during dinner. "Mom, when I go to college, will you help me pick classes like great-grandma Rose did for you?" The question revealed that her daughter saw education and career success as normal parts of life rather than privileges she might have to sacrifice. Victoria had broken a cycle that had constrained women for generations. Lily would grow up assuming she could be both professionally successful and devoted to family because she'd seen it lived out daily. That night, Victoria sat in Rose's old chair on the porch, watching snow fall on the mountains, reflecting on how completely her life had transformed. 2 years earlier, she'd been powerless, financially dependent, and convinced she had nothing valuable to offer. Now she owned a thriving business, a beautiful home, and most importantly, she'd raised her children to believe in their own potential. Rose had been right about everything. The inheritance had given her opportunities, but the real transformation had come from rediscovering her own capabilities and refusing to accept anyone else's limitations. Spring brought unexpected complications. It started with a call from Nathan's attorney requesting a meeting about new developments. Victoria's stomach dropped, but she'd learned to trust her strength rather than give in to panic. Sarah accompanied her to Marcus Webb's office, where Nathan sat looking more confident than she'd seen him since losing custody. "Victoria, we need to discuss Lily and Charlotte's living arrangements," Webb began. "My client has concerns about the stability of your current situation." Nathan leaned forward. "I know about your business problems, Victoria. Several clients have complained about your investment advice, and I've heard your office lease is in jeopardy." Victoria looked at Sarah, confused. Her business was thriving, her clients were satisfied, and she owned the building housing her office. Whatever Nathan thought he knew was completely wrong, but his confidence suggested he believed his information was reliable. "Mr. Chambers, what specific problems are you referring to?" Sarah asked. "We haven't received any formal complaints regarding Ms. Chambers' business." Webb produced a folder. "We have statements from 3 clients expressing dissatisfaction. We also have documentation that her office building is facing foreclosure." As Sarah reviewed the documents, Victoria realized what had happened. Someone had provided Nathan with false information. The client complaints were fabricated, and the foreclosure notices were for a completely different property. "These documents contain significant inaccuracies," Sarah said carefully. "The property address doesn't match Ms. Chambers' building, and these alleged complaints would need verification." Nathan's confidence wavered, but he pressed forward. "Even if these specific issues are incorrect, Victoria's lifestyle isn't sustainable. When her luck runs out, my children will suffer." That's when Victoria decided to end Nathan's delusions permanently. She asked for a private conference room and opened her briefcase, removing current financial statements showing her investment portfolio, business revenue, and property holdings. The numbers were staggering. Her net worth had grown to over $5.8 million through careful management of Rose's inheritance and reinvestment of her business profits. "Nathan, you've been operating under serious misconceptions about my financial situation," Victoria said, watching his face as he processed the numbers. "This isn't luck. This is the result of education, planning, and hard work." Webb studied the documents, then looked at his client with barely concealed frustration. "Mr. Chambers, these figures indicate Ms. Chambers is financially secure to a degree that makes your stability concerns completely unfounded." But Nathan wasn't ready to surrender. "Money doesn't make someone a good parent. I've provided consistent care." That accusation transformed Victoria's disappointment into anger. "Nathan, in the 8 months since the children have been living with me, Lily's grades have improved. Charlotte joined the school drama club. Both have made friends. They're thriving because they have a mother who believes in their potential." Sarah presented additional documentation, school reports, teacher evaluations, pediatrician records, all showing the children were healthier and happier. Furthermore, Sarah continued, "Ms. Chambers has established college funds for both children and created trusts that will provide for their education regardless of what happens to her business." Webb requested a recess. Through the glass door, Victoria could see Nathan's increasingly desperate gestures. When they returned, Webb's tone was more conciliatory. "Perhaps we can discuss a modified visitation schedule." "No," Victoria said firmly. "We're not modifying anything. The current arrangement is working perfectly, and I won't disrupt their stability to accommodate Nathan's inability to accept that I'm a successful parent and professional." As they prepared to leave, Nathan made one final attempt. "Victoria, I'm just trying to protect our children. You've changed so much I barely recognize you." Victoria stopped at the door. "You're right, Nathan. I have changed. I've become the person I was always capable of being before I let you convince me I was worth less than I am. Our children are better off because of that change, whether you can accept it or not." Walking out of that office, Victoria felt profound closure. Nathan's attempts to undermine her custody, business, and confidence had failed completely. More importantly, she demonstrated to herself that she could face his challenges without fear or doubt about her own worth. 1 year later, Victoria stood in the conference room of her expanded office, looking out at a view that never failed to inspire her. The business had grown beyond anything she'd imagined: 15 employees, offices in 3 towns, and a client base that included some of the most successful individuals in the region. But the real measure of success wasn't in financial statements or professional accolades. It was in the sound of Lily practicing cello in the next room after school, while Charlotte worked on homework at the desk Victoria had set up for her. Both had adapted beautifully to spending afternoons at Victoria's workplace, treating it as an extension of their home rather than an intrusion. "Mom, Mrs. Patterson wants to know if you can help her grandson with college planning," Lily called from the reception area. At 12 years old, she understood Victoria's business well enough to field simple questions. The integration of professional and personal life had happened naturally, creating a model of working motherhood Victoria wished she'd seen during her own childhood. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Federal Appeals Court just ruled on the Henderson case. Your testimony was cited in the decision. Congratulations on changing employment law in 4 states." The message referred to a discrimination case where Victoria had testified as an expert witness about the financial impact of forcing women to choose between career and family. But perhaps the most satisfying recognition came from an unexpected source. The State University's business school had invited her to teach a graduate seminar in wealth management, acknowledging her expertise in helping clients navigate personal and professional goals. Professor Victoria, as Lily teasingly called her, would begin teaching in the fall while maintaining her practice. Nathan had faded into the background, maintaining scheduled visitation but no longer attempting to control their arrangements. His business had struggled after several political allies faced ethics investigations, weakening the connections that had fueled his success. Meanwhile, Victoria's reputation for ethical practices had made her firm the preferred choice for anyone seeking financial guidance. The children saw their father regularly and maintained a relationship with him, but they'd grown secure in knowing their primary home was with Victoria. Lily had started talking about studying business in college, like Mom did. Charlotte showed an aptitude for mathematics that reminded Victoria of her own childhood. That evening, as they sat around the dinner table, Charlotte asked a question that revealed how completely their lives had transformed. "Mom, why did Daddy used to say you couldn't work? You're really good at your job." The innocent question from her 10-year-old daughter captured the absurdity of everything Victoria had once accepted as truth. "Some people believe that taking care of a family means you can't do other important work," Victoria explained carefully. "But I've learned that being good at one thing often makes you better at other things." After the children went to bed, Victoria sat in Rose's old chair, now positioned in her home office, and reread the letter that had changed everything. Rose's words about trusting her education, understanding her worth, and building something true to herself had proven prophetic. But the most profound truth was one Victoria had discovered for herself: real security didn't come from having money or professional success, though both were valuable. Real security came from knowing she could create value, solve problems, and build relationships based on mutual respect rather than dependency. Victoria opened her laptop and began writing what would become her first article for the Journal of Financial Planning, Beyond the Glass Ceiling: How Personal Transformation Drives Professional Innovation. As she wrote, she realized her story wasn't really about divorce, custody battles, or financial success. It was about discovering that the woman Nathan had dismissed as unemployable had always possessed the capabilities to build something meaningful. Rose had seen it, Margaret had seen it, even Patricia had seen it from their first conversation. The only person who hadn't seen it was Victoria herself, trapped as she was in a narrative that defined her worth through someone else's achievements. But narratives can be rewritten, and lives can be rebuilt. Sometimes it takes losing everything to discover what you're actually capable of creating. 3 years after Victoria found Rose's letter, she stood at the podium of the Regional Business Summit, addressing an audience of over 500 financial professionals. "When I started rebuilding my life," Victoria said, "I thought success meant proving my ex-husband wrong. But I discovered something more important: success means building a life that honors all of who you are." The audience, mostly women who'd faced similar challenges, leaned forward, engaged. Financial independence isn't just about having money. It's about understanding your own capabilities and refusing to let anyone convince you that you're worth less than you are. After her keynote, dozens of women approached with their own stories. Women who'd given up careers for marriages that failed. Women trapped in relationships by financial dependence. Women told they were too emotional, too impractical, too something for professional success. Victoria listened to each story, seeing herself in their struggles, offering the guidance Rose had given her through that letter. That evening, Victoria returned home to find Lily and Charlotte in the kitchen, attempting to bake a surprise cake for her speaking engagement. "We're so proud of you, Mom," Lily said, flour dusting her hair. "You showed everyone that moms can do anything." Charlotte added, "And you showed us too." Those words meant more than any professional accolade ever could. Later, as Victoria reviewed her business plans for the coming year, her phone rang. An unfamiliar number. "Ms. Chambers? This is Dean Morrison from Wharton Business School. We'd like to discuss a faculty position in our wealth management program." The offer was prestigious, teaching at one of the nation's top business schools while maintaining her practice. It was everything she'd once dreamed of before Nathan convinced her those dreams were incompatible with family. "I'm interested," Victoria said. "But I need to discuss it with my daughters first. They're part of every major decision I make." "That's exactly the perspective we're looking for," Dean Morrison replied. That night, Victoria sat with Lily and Charlotte, explaining the opportunity and what it might mean for their family. "Would we move?" Charlotte asked. "We'd keep this house," Victoria assured her. "But I'd teach 2 days a week in Philadelphia. You'd come with me sometimes, stay with Dad sometimes, and we'd figure out what works best for our family." "I think you should do it," Lily said seriously. "Great-Grandma Rose would want you to." Victoria felt tears forming. Her 12-year-old daughter understood something profound about legacy and potential. "You're right," Victoria said. She would. 6 months later, Victoria began her position at Wharton while maintaining her practice in the Berkshires. The arrangement required careful coordination, but it worked because Victoria had built a team of talented professionals who shared her values. Nathan had faded almost completely from their lives beyond scheduled visitation. His business had downsized significantly, and he'd moved to a smaller house. The man who'd once defined himself by his empire had been forced to discover who he was without it. Meanwhile, Victoria's empire, built on genuine relationships, ethical practices, and authentic value creation, continued growing. But the real triumph came at Lily's 8th grade graduation when her daughter gave a speech about role models. "My mom taught me that you don't have to choose between different parts of yourself," Lily said to a gymnasium full of families. "You can be a great parent and a successful professional. You can be strong and caring. You can fall down and get back up stronger than before." Victoria sat in the audience, tears streaming down her face, watching her daughter articulate lessons she'd learned the hard way. After the ceremony, Margaret approached her. "Rose would be so proud," Margaret said. "Not just of what you've accomplished, but of who you've become." That evening, Victoria sat on the porch of the cabin that had once seemed like a symbol of failure. Now it was home, the foundation from which she'd built everything else. She opened Rose's letter one final time, reading the closing words. "Victoria, you have everything you need to build the life you deserve. Trust yourself, trust your education, and trust that I knew exactly what I was doing when I prepared all of this for you." Looking at the life she'd built, the business, the children, the career, the legacy, Victoria finally understood the full scope of Rose's gift. It wasn't the money, though that had provided crucial opportunities. It wasn't even the financial knowledge, though that had proven invaluable. Rose's real gift was belief. Belief that Victoria possessed capabilities worth preserving. Belief that those capabilities would emerge when needed. Belief that Victoria would eventually see herself the way Rose had always seen her. And Rose had been right. Victoria's office at Wharton overlooked the campus where students rushed between classes, carrying dreams and ambitions and uncertainties about their futures. She was now director of the Center for Women in Wealth Management, a program she'd founded to help women develop financial expertise and independence. Lily was starting college at Columbia, planning to study economics with a focus on closing the gender wealth gap. Charlotte, now 15, volunteered at Victoria's Berkshire practice, learning the business from the ground up. Nathan had reached out 6 months ago, asking to meet for coffee. Victoria agreed, curious what he wanted after years of distance. He looked older, humbled by circumstances Victoria understood better than most. "I owe you an apology," Nathan said. "A real one. I spent our entire marriage convincing you that you were worth less than you were because it made me feel more valuable. I'm sorry." Victoria studied him, seeing not the man who'd destroyed her life but someone who'd finally understood the cost of his choices. "I appreciate that, Nathan. Truly. But the person who needed to hear that apology was the woman I was 5 years ago. The woman I am now doesn't need your validation." "I know," he said. "But I wanted you to know that watching you succeed, really succeed, not just survive, taught me something important. I thought power meant controlling people. You showed me that real power means helping people discover their own strength. After he left, Victoria sat in the coffee shop where so much of her transformation had unfolded, reflecting on how far she'd come. She'd built a multi-million-dollar business, raised 2 confident daughters, changed employment law, founded an academic program, written a best-selling book. But her greatest achievement was simpler and more profound. She'd learned to see herself clearly. Not as Nathan's accessory, not as Rose's granddaughter, but as Victoria Chambers, a woman with her own capabilities, her own worth, her own power. That evening, Victoria returned to the Berkshire cabin for the weekend. The house had been expanded and renovated, but Rose's old chair still sat on the porch. Victoria settled into it with her laptop, reviewing applications from women seeking scholarships to her Wharton program. Each application told a story of potential interrupted, capabilities dismissed, dreams deferred. She read each one carefully, seeing herself in their struggles, remembering what it felt like to believe you were less than you were. And she approved every single scholarship, determined to be for these women what Rose had been for her, someone who believed in their potential before they believed in it themselves. As the sun set over the mountains, Victoria's phone buzzed with a text from Lily. "Mom, I just declared my major. Economics with a focus on financial empowerment for women. Because of you, I know exactly who I want to be." Victoria smiled, feeling Rose's presence in the mountain wind and her own reflection in her daughter's dreams. She'd lost everything once: mansion, marriage, custody, identity. But from those ashes, she'd built something far more valuable: a life of authenticity, purpose, and genuine power. And the best part? She was teaching an entire generation of women to do the same. Victoria opened her laptop and began drafting her next article. The Phoenix Principle: Why Losing Everything Can Lead to Finding Yourself. The scared woman who'd walked into that courtroom 5 years ago was gone forever. In her place stood someone who knew, with absolute certainty, that her worth had never depended on anyone's approval but her own. And that knowledge had set her free.